Fun Ideas Productions presents the Fun Ideas Podcast.
Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to Fun Ideas Podcast number 28. Alvin! The story of Ross Bagdasarian Sr., Liberty Records, Format Films, and The Alvin Show is out! Order your hardback, paperback, and ebook copies today on Amazon and at bearmanormedia.com. A reminder that I am scheduled to be on Stu's show live on April 22 discussing this book, and I also appeared recently on Phil Hall's online movie show to discuss it as well. Our guest today is a writer of many books, including the Encyclopedia of Film, the Motion Picture Film Guide, Digging Down Deep, Subterranean and Homesick movie reviews from 1975 to 2017, and Digging Down Deeper, film writings found in the Scrapheap. Here he is, Paul Brenner. On the phone today I have Paul Brenner, who is a film and pop culture historian. So welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Mark, it's good to be here. Good to be anywhere. About myself. Well, I've written a couple books which are collections of my movie reviews and video reviews down through the ages. Been writing about films for about, since the mid-'70s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I've lived to tell the tale. What else? I made a couple of short films, wrote a couple of scripts that went nowhere, and here I am.
Okay. Well, I guess going back to the beginning, it's like you told me that you were doing it during the Ford administration, and you wanted to forget Watergate and disco. Is that kind of how the inspiration was to do films and pop culture writings,
exactly
as it were?
That.
Okay.
I was in Chicago when they had the big burning of the disco albums rally, so I didn't want to take part in that, and so instead I went to see a Marcello Mastroianni movie.
Oh, wow. Which one was that?
A Special Day.
Oh, I don't think I've seen that one. Anyway.
It's with Sophia Loren.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He makes a good egg omelet in that movie.
I've seen a lot of Marcello. I guess I'll have to look that one up because I just don't recognize the title on that. But I've seen a lot of Sophia films. I've seen a lot of Marcello films. But okay.
Yeah.
So,
no.
when growing up, did you think about becoming a film writer or a reviewer, or did you just go and see everything? I mean, did your parents encourage this? Did they take you to the theater all the time?
Well, I was always interested in movies. I remember my father, when I was a kid, he had an old 8mm projector, and he bought a bunch of 8mm, 5-minute versions of Buster Keaton movies and Laurel and Hardy pictures, and like a 10-minute version of Safety Last, and so I got interested in it, I guess, that way. Mm-hmm. And when I was old enough to save up money from my paper route, I bought my own Super 8 projector, and I started buying these Castle films that they used to sell. This was like a zillion years before video, and they used to sell these like 10-minute silent versions of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and the Wolfman meets somebody else. So I bought all those kind of pictures, and I was a big Jerry Lewis fan when I was a kid, so I used to watch the telethon, and in New York there used to be a kids show host named Sonny Fox, and he used to have this like Wagnerian Sunday kids show that went on for like 4 hours or something called Wonderama, and he'd encourage kids to have backyard muscular dystrophy carnivals. So I did that, and I would tote out my projector and force all the neighborhood kids to watch some silent movie.
Now, I never did the muscular dystrophy carnivals. I do remember those. I grew up on the West Coast. But I remember Super 8 films were kind of very elusive to me because it's kind of funny now, like you could stream for free or whatever, but DVDs are like $10 or $20, and it's like I remember one of those short little black and white Super 8 films could be like $100 or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Well, these are actually cheaper than that. They had Super 8 movies that you would go to the big camera places, in my case, New York, and you'd be able to buy, I don't know, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or something, but these would be in the camera section of department stores, and they'd have the high-end versions, which were like 10 minutes long of these movies, but then they had the cheap ones, which were like 50 feet, and I remember I had a minute and a half version of Lawrence of Arabia.
So I guess I remember the longer versions. Yeah. What do you tell in a minute and a half on that, if you remember?
Yeah, I know. Just that one scene of Omar Sharif showing up to a minute and a half.
Isn't that longer than that?
Coming in through the desert, you know.
Wow. Yeah, I remember the Black Hawk film catalog, and so that's my first exposure. But I guess those might have been more pricey. I was a kid, so I didn't really go and price things. But if you say like the Castle films were a lot cheaper, maybe they were. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think the Black Hawk films were you know, they used to show, if they had like a Laurel and Hardy short, that'd be like the whole thing, so it'd be like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But Castle films would be like, you know, a 10-minute version of The Mummy, you know, and most of the film would consist of Boris Karloff dissolving into dust, you know. There wouldn't be much time for anything but that.
Somebody should compile all those and just do the Super 8 versions of every film, you know, and just make a feature film of just the Super 8 versions or something.
That'd be great, especially today.
And again, my exposure to it, I thought it was sat there pricey, and then as videotapes came along, then Black Hawk started closing them out, and you could get like old cartoons and shorts and stuff for like $1 or $2, and that's when I started. Like that.
So that's what you bought?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I still have those now, so I haven't watched them in a while because I have to pull out the projector and everything. But
right.
So when you started doing film reviews, did you just do them for yourself, or did you actually have them published somewhere?
Well, I actually started publishing. I went to Rutgers University, and I started publishing them in the Rutgers paper there. Mm-hmm. I think the first review I ever wrote was for the Orson Welles movie F for Fake.
Oh, yes, I see that.
And I continued on from there, and I just kept writing reviews, and then I went to graduate school. I wrote over there, and then somehow I got into writing for these online movie sites that at that point just started. Like, I think I was one of the first critics for, it was called Critics' Choice, which I think was the first AOL movie review site. And, so I wrote for a lot of online sites like Media Screen and filmcritic.com and Film Racket, and wrote for encyclopedias and things like that. So I've been doing that, but it kind of like undercover, because I had to have a full-time job, so I'd be doing this stuff at night in the shadows and sending stuff out. So,
did you have anything interesting about your standard vocation, or 9-to-5 job or anything, or is it just not too even worth mentioning?
Well, I'll mention it. I worked for 35 years at the City University of New York at John Jay College. I ran the video production department over there.
So that's not a bad gig, yeah.
So we made a lot of videos. I got to meet Trump once.
Hey.
And they were shooting an episode of The Apprentice in the gym, and so we had to get all the AV stuff out of there, and he shook my hand, and then when he left, I checked my pocket to make sure my wallet was still there.
So you met him kind of later on, you know. I was wondering if you met him in the old real estate days, but I was like, okay.
No. I don't have a place at Trump Tower.
You didn't get evicted or anything?
No. I used to have a seat at the Starbucks there, but that's about it.
Now, when you're doing all your reviews over the years, when you started out or even later on, did you stick to any particular genre, or did you review anything that came across, you know,
usually for the websites, I reviewed, half and half. You know, when a film came out, I was like assigned the film.
Mm-hmm.
But then I reviewed DVDs and laser discs, so I usually would suggest, this laser disc might be interesting to write about. But the new releases, I was usually assigned.
Mm-hmm. And were those generally mainstream Hollywood type pictures, or still kind of independent things, or?
Yeah, no, I was mostly the independent guy, foreign film guy.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't usually review any of the big popular releases, which in the last 20 years, I kind of consider myself lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's all Marvel superheroes or Star Wars or something.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I was just looking at the, top-grossing films of last year.
Mm-hmm.
All 10 movies, except for Bohemian Rhapsody, are either sequels or, superhero movies.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy. You got Avengers was the number one film, Black Panther, and everything. And then I was looking 10 years early to see if it was different, and it's really not like a new development, because 10 years ago it was the same thing, except for a couple of films. Like The Dark Knight was on there, and Indiana Jones, and stuff like that.
Yeah, we like our sequels. No, I don't know. So, what's your favorite genre? I mean, you do the indie films, but I mean that can be a very vast, kind of a field of genres itself. I mean, do you tend to focus on horror, or what do you tend to focus on?
Well, I really like writing about comedies.
Oh, okay.
So I usually gravitate back to that. The independent films, I don't know. It's hit or miss for me. I mean, most of the independent films I reviewed for the websites, I kind of started hitting independent films after Pulp Fiction came out, when it actually indicated to the powers that be in the movie studios that actually independent films actually made money. So everything became mostly, copies of Pulp Fiction. So anyway, the independent films I actually liked were not so much films made here, but films in other countries. Like, I don't know, there's a Swedish filmmaker named Roy Andersson, who made some great, deadpan apocalyptic comedies. Like, he had a film that came out a couple of years ago called A Pigeon Sat on a Branch Reflecting on Existence.
Wow.
Which was, it was just, it kind of reminded me of Jim Jarmusch, Stranger Than Paradise.
Oh, yeah.
Because each scene would be a scene and a shot. There wouldn't be any cuts, and some kind of a droll incident would carry the scene forward into the next. And who else? Kurita's a pretty good filmmaker from Japan. He has a film out now called Shoplifters, which is great. And his previous film was called After the Storm, which is really good. And who else? Guy Madden I love. And then incredibly Godard, Jean-Luc Godard. He's almost 90, and he's got a new film out called The Image Book.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and his previous film was Farewell to Language, which was shot in 3D.
Huh.
So it's that kind of stuff I like, and then, of course, comedies I'm a sucker for.
Actually, I like comedies too. Now, on comedies, are you still strictly independent? Because, when I've gone to film festivals or watched a lot of independent, it seems like there's not that many comedies. It seems like they do more dramas or even horror, like I said, and there's not too many straight comedies. Like one indie comedy that I liked from years ago. I mean, it's probably 15 years ago now. Is this one about selling used cars called Suckers? And but you never seem to get that type of, almost farcical slapstick type of stuff. I mean, it's a little dark comedy too, but in independent, why is that? Is it just too hard to write, or what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think what's that line that Edmund Gwynn had? He said when he was on his deathbed, he says, "Dying is easy, comedy is hard."
Right.
So I think, especially if you're doing like a character comedy, a lot of cases that type of comedy doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There's no real comedians anymore. I saw Private Life, which was really good, a Tamara Jenkins movie this year with Paul Giamatti and Catherine Hahn, where they play two 50-ish parents who try to have their first child, which is really good. I don't know, I guess, Woody Allen maybe 30 years ago before he hit the nostalgia trail. But comedies, I think it's hard to do, and I don't think people have a sense of humor anymore either.
Right.
And, how could you? So...
Well, it is true. Another genre is like, it's kind of funny. I watched a documentary, one of those Netflix ones about the 80s, and I watched the 70s and 60s and 90s as well. But on the 80s one, they were talking about, and I remember this at the time, after MASH went away and after, what was the other long-running one, Happy Days or whatever went away, that's the end of the situation comedy. I guess that's it. And then they said, like, the next year Cosby Show came along, and then there was Cheers and blah 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 blah. And it's like, whatever they said then, I think exists now, and in movies too. It's like, I guess there are comedies or sitcoms or comical things, but like going into magazines, there's really only Mad Magazine, and in movies, you get your mainstream, like, Judd Apatow stuff or something like that, but, is there anybody out there, like, there used to be comedy teams like the Stooges and, Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy and everything. Is there anybody on the independent level that's even attempting doing stuff like that, or is it just, nothing like that anymore?
God, not that I can think of.
Oh, okay. Because I always think
maybe
sometimes
there's somebody out there
that I'm missing something or something.
Yeah. No, the other thing is, with streaming films and everything like that, there's so many movies out there in so many different formats that maybe there is somebody out there, but you don't know because there's so much, stuff to see.
Right, that's true.
I don't know.
And it is kind of weird, the ones you mentioned, how did you see them? For example, before you answer, is like, I'm a big Coen Brothers fan, and sometimes they do comedies. And their latest film, which the name escapes me, but it's on Netflix, and it's, a bunch of cowboy stories, little short stories.
The Ballad of Jay,
yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's like, I just looked it up because one day I was like looking around on Wikipedia and I said, I wonder if they have a new film now. And then I said, there it is. Because the last one I remember was Hail Caesar. But it's like, it's like, is it hard for these guys to get these films out? I mean, Coen Brothers are well-known guys. They did, they had the Best Picture and they, things like that, and they can't catch a break because they attempt a comedy.
I don't know. I don't know. It stumps me.
Yeah.
Talking about Netflix, though, they they produced, I thought, the best film of last year, which is 40 years old. They put together finally Orson Welles' film The Other Side of the Wind. Have you seen that?
I've not seen it. I've heard about it, but I've heard mixed things about it. Well, what do you think about it? You know,
Yeah. I mean, some people said it's not worth watching. It's unwatchable, but you know, it didn't seem that way to me. I mean, the editing, the story, it plays on so many different levels, and you know, I thought it was great. And you know, if they're emulating what Wells wanted to do in the mid '70s, it's like the editing style is revolutionary even today. So yeah, I'd check it out.
Okay. I was interested in it, and I was totally fascinated about who was in it, you know. I mean, really kind of semi-obscure people like Benny Rubin or something. I can't even think of all the people off the top of my head.
Oh, my God, yeah. There's even a shot of George Jessel delivering a eulogy to John Huston.
So is there a cohesive storyline to the movie, or how does it work? I mean, what's the basic premise of it or plot, if you can reveal that without giving too much away?
It doesn't have much of a plot. It's about John Huston plays a famous film director whose artistic, talents are abandoning him, and he's throwing it all in and trying to do a film catering, circa, I guess, 1970. He's trying to emulate art movies from that time. So he makes this pornographic art film, and he's trying to get a studio to back it. The studio won't back it, so they have this big party, and most of the film is at this party where all these Hollywood hangers-on are there, and Houston comes there, and he knows that his film is never going to get made, and that's it. That's mostly is the party, and then the end of the film starts off revealing the fact that the John Huston character, crashed his car and he's dead. So it leads up to that, which is a pretty bleak, especially, when you consider Orson Welles' own life, it's hard not to equate that character with Orson Welles. But in spite of the bleakness of it, it's really a lively film.
Well, I'll have to check it out. I mean, I have seen F for Fake, which was a very interesting and strange film, in my opinion. But I don't know. Was that the last one released during his lifetime, or did you get one more out? I forgot. I knew it.
I think that was it. He did a film about the filming of Othello, which didn't really have a major release. So I think F for Fake was, his last released film. And actually this film, which was made just after F for Fake, was shot just after F for Fake, has a lot of the F for Fake, editing style, schizophrenic editing style that film has.
So I might like it. I mean, I didn't dislike F for Fake. It's just, interesting to me. I can't say, it's not a positive or negative. It's like I go, but Orson Welles, even on the famous ones, Ambersons and Citizen Kane, always did kind of unique type of head scratching scenes in everything he ever did. So it just maybe have got more commonplace in the later ones. I don't know.
My favorite part of F for Fake is at the end, because at the beginning of the film he looks in the camera and he tells the audience that what you're going to see for the next hour is going to be totally true.
Right.
And then at the end of the movie there's this thing about a woman having an affair with Picasso. And then at the end of that little anecdote, Wells goes, I remember at the beginning I told you everything I was going to tell you the next hour is true. Well, the hour's up 20 minutes ago.
That's right. I forgot he said that. I've seen it. Now, are you knowledgeable about Wells to the point of knowing his other unreleased stuff? I know he started different projects and then kind of got stopped, and also how this particular film that you were just talking about got completed.
Well, there's a lot of unfinished Wells projects. He did like a Merchant of Venice, and he actually, what's the name of it? He actually shot a film with him, Lawrence Harvey, and Oya Kodar called, I think it was called The Deep End or something like that, which was actually made based on a script after his death called Dead Calm with Nicole Kidman and Sam Neill.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of projects that, are floating around.
Well, how did this current one get finally completed and finished?
Well, there's like a whole book about that.
Okay.
I think it's called Orson Welles' last film. I think Josh Karp wrote it.
Okay, I'll have to look into that.
And it's about just how this film, at that point, the film wasn't made, but just all the crazy stuff that went on, with him trying to shoot it. And there's also a documentary about the making of the film, too, that I think is on Netflix.
Okay.
It's just he kept shooting it, whenever he had money for, years afterwards. And then they were going to finally finish it, and of course it's more detailed than this, but he got funding from the, I believe it was the brother of the Shah of Iran to make the film, but then they had the Iranian Revolution, the Shah was deposed, and his film got, locked up, couldn't get it out of Iran. So,
wow.
There's that kind of stuff. So
I'm gonna have to read about this. Yeah. See, that's the thing. It's like I know the famous films Orson Welles did, and I've known the latter day stuff he did, which wasn't necessarily impressive all the time. But I haven't really followed Welles' career. I know there's lots of books about him and things like that, but it's like when this movie kind of came out, then that sparked my interest, and I go, well, how come this took this long to come out? And, I'm sure there's legal reasons and stuff like that, and are there more coming? Does he have other stuff if he had all those other aborted projects?
Well, who knows? I mean, maybe if this movie sparks interest, maybe people will, look into his other stuff. But, yeah, check it out.
Okay. And are there any other films like that? The one that comes to mind is the Jerry Lewis one, The Day the Clown Cried. Which
The Day the Clown Cried.
Have you ever seen anything other than maybe the little bits that are on YouTube and stuff, or anything like that?
No, that's all I've seen, but I remember Jerry Lewis was appearing in New York at one point. Some kind of crazy lecture called Laughter Through Healing, which was at some kind of immense synagogue, and he was taking questions and answers, and somebody in the audience asked Lewis, are you ever going to release The Day the Clown Cried? And he says, I appreciate your answer, and I really love the fact that you're interested and you want to know about a film that you've heard about for years, but get the hell out of here.
Oh, wow.
And threw the guys out. So, when I saw that, I really want to see it now.
Yeah. And I've heard different things that, Harry Shearer's seen it or not, but now I'm kind of more suspicious that maybe he hasn't seen it, so who knows?
Yeah, that's what I'm suspicious of, too. I don't know if this is true or not, but supposedly Lewis was supposedly walked around with a locked case which contained all the, I guess, video footage of The Day the Clown Cried, so he wanted to make sure nobody would steal it, which I can't believe either. But supposedly it's now belongs to the Library of Congress. He donated a lot of his stuff to the Library of Congress, so maybe someday we will see it.
Yeah, I think I read on that one or heard about that he set it up to be opened up. I mean, I guess it'd be 8 years from now. It's like,
Yeah.
I was like, I don't expect much. I just like to see it because, I mean, I expect it to be on the level of the previous release film, Which Way to the Front, which wasn't much.
Oh, man. No. It's got to be better than that.
Maybe.
For one thing, it doesn't have Jan Murray in it.
Hey.
So.
Well, you don't know. You don't know. He made him.
Yeah, maybe. And I love the idea that the film has B.B. Anderson in it, who is one of Ingmar Bergman's, recurring stars.
Mm-hmm.
And she probably, appeared in it after Through a Glass Darkly or something. So just the idea that she would appear in that film after doing the Ingmar Bergman movie is stunning in itself.
Now, what do you think is the reason why he never released it? I mean, it can't just be the funding issue or something like that. It seems like Lewis could have overcome those obstacles.
Yeah, well, he claimed that he didn't like the film, and so he didn't want to foist it upon the public. So he claimed that it was a bad film. And like you said, he did release Which Way to the Front, so this must be really bad. But I'll see it.
Well, me too. But I was thinking maybe this is the reason why he tried to commit suicide in '73. I don't know.
Maybe
it wasn't the Percodan.
The Percodan, yeah.
I don't know. See, Lewis, I do know about. Wells, not so much. But it's like, so I'm kind of curious about that. Let's see. So you did two film books, correct? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so tell me about these. I mean, it's like I don't have them and probably should get them. I mean, this is an interesting revelatory interview because I go, wow, films I've never heard or seen and books I've never seen or read or so you. And I did this on another podcast, too. There was somebody that was talking about the current comic books, and I go, oh, okay, well, I'll learn about the current comic books. I can't really converse, but okay. Anyway, so you have Digging Down Deep, Subterranean Homesick movie reviews from 75 to 2017, and then another one that's similar titled, Digging Down Deep, or Film Writings Found in the Scrapheap. I'm trying to read my writing.
Well, the second book is called Digging Down Deeper.
Deeper, yes, I do have Deeper.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm trying to read my scribbles. I wrote down some things here.
Well, the first book is just a collection of all the film reviews that I still have from when I started writing, film reviews. Mm-hmm. And the second book is a collection of the same thing. It is like video reviews I've written, and also profiles of... like Jerry Lewis gets 2 profiles in this section, and Norman Mailer I write about his films. Then stuff like the 10 most miserable film performances in film history, things like that. And, so they're both collections of everything I've written that I still have.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working on a third book, which is inevitably called Digging Down Deeper. Deepest, I should say.
Yes.
I don't even know the titles.
Too deep.
Digging Down Deepest, which is going to be a collection of movie quotes.
Oh, okay. Now,
and after that, I'm going to walk into the ocean like James Mason at the end of A Star's book.
So I'll ask about them backwards. So in the movie quote one that you're working on, I mean... What constitutes a good movie quote? What is it one that's popular or just ones you personally like?
Just I personally like after seeing the film, something that pops in my head and I go, oh. And a lot of movie quotes became or have become the way of the world. Mm-hmm. Like Chico Marx's quote from Duck Soup, "Who you gonna believe, me or your own eyes?" can be applied to our political environment today.
So how do you write that? How do you write that particular book? Just put the quote like that, and then just write about your opinions? Like, what did you say about that quote?
Well, right now I'm just compiling the quotes, so I think it's probably just going to be the quotes, and I'm trying to figure out how to separate them into chapters. So I'm thinking of doing it based on each chapter based on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of death, and put the quotes under each stage.
Okay. So
good night, everybody.
So going to the previous book that is already published, the film writings found in the Scrapheap. What are those? There's not really reviews in there, right? Is that what you're saying? Is more articles about filmmakers and things like that?
Well, there's video reviews.
Okay, video reviews. Okay.
I'd review Laserdiscs or DVDs or what have you, and then also profiles of people.
Okay, so what constitutes a video review? Is it because it came out originally on video, or is it just because that's the way you viewed it?
Just, the stuff that came out, films that came out on video, or, it starts with, of course, Laserdiscs, and goes all the way through to Blu-rays, and just what happened to have been released, it runs the gamut from, let's see here, The Iceman Cometh next to the Jack Park collection.
Okay.
It's like, it's like every type of film or television program that was put out on video that I reviewed.
Okay, so you do cover TV shows too. I mean, I guess Jack Park collection is that. So, and I do have that collection. So yeah, it's.
I got Sid Caesar, Sid Caesar DVDs came out 10 years ago or something.
Right.
Collection of D.W. Griffith films. That kind of thing.
And were any these reviews were all published elsewhere, or is there any unique material that you added to the book?
No, they were all published on websites I had written for.
Got it. Okay.
Or it could have been a lot of stuff came from a book I contributed to called the Encyclopedia of Film. Just what I have.
And let's see. I think I've seen Encyclopedia of Film, and then there's another one called Motion Picture Film Guide. But again,
Right.
Are those focusing more on the independent type films than like?
Well, Encyclopedia of Film was a James Monaco book, and it was basically, an encyclopedia of film before David Thompson cornered the market on it. Motion Picture Film Guide is a collection of films that came out, that year. There's another one called McGill's Survey of Foreign Language Cinema that I wrote for. So I write about The Mystery of Caspar Hauser, Werner Herzog picture, and then The White Hell of Piz Palu, Leni Riefenstahl film, directed by G.W. Pabst, that kind of thing. It's everything.
And in doing all this film history or film reviews or things like this, have you ever been asked to do any commentaries for any films?
You mean for videos?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't.
Oh, okay. All right. I was going to ask about those, but I guess. Let's see.
I guess probably because these books are fairly recent, and
okay.
So I don't know. Writing on a movie review site, you have no way in hell to figure out how many people are reading what you wrote or things like that.
Right.
Unless they send you a nasty letter or email or something like that.
I guess I was focusing on the fact that the first book dates back to 1975, so I was figuring somewhere along the line they would say, hey, this guy has a knowledge of these type of films, let's have him do a commentary. It seems like everybody does a commentary at some point, so that's why I was curious about that.
Yeah, no, they didn't get me yet.
All right, get this guy. No, I've done a few commentaries, and they're actually kind of fun, especially if it's a film you like and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I would say, what did you do commentaries for?
I did commentaries mainly for cartoons, so I've done some Casper ones, and I did Tennessee Tuxedo, Underdog, and then in recent times I've been doing these ones for Kino Lorber for Greg Ford on all the various DePatie Freeling theatrical cartoons. So we started off with the Inspector and the Aardvark, and then after we went through all the other ones, and then we got to the Pink Panther, and so there's supposed to be 6 volumes, and I think we've done up to volume 5 right at the moment.
Oh, man.
So, yeah.
I have to check it out. Greg Ford did an insane commentary on the Blu-ray release of Son of Paleface, Bob Hope movie.
Yeah, he talked about that once with me. We talk on the phone every so often about what we're doing on these things, and yeah, he said he had a lot of fun doing that one. So
yeah. But, it sounded like he did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of his favorite films. He is a fan of Frank Tashlin. Of course, he did Looney Tunes and did commentaries on the Golden Age of Looney Tunes. So,
Yeah. He talks a lot on the Son of Paleface commentary about Frank Tashlin's time as an animator for Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, that's one of my favorite Hope films. I don't think I have his commentary. So, going through, since you said you like comedies so much, and this can be from the beginning of film to now, what are some of your favorite comedies?
Oh, my God. Well, I like Buster Keaton. I love, Sherlock Jr.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, the Marx Brothers. Practically all their film, I'd say all of their pre-MGM movies are great, and Duck Soup and Monkey Business, Horse Feathers, Animal Crackers, Coconuts even, and even The Night at the Opera I like. But A Night at the Opera is, for me, sad in a way because you can see how their career's going to go afterwards.
Yeah.
By watching that film. Some of the Marx Brothers I like Wheeler and Woolsey, Bob Hope, Hope and Crosby, Jerry Lewis, Martin and Lewis. I'm sure there's a ton of people I'm leaving out. I even like Eddie Cantor.
I haven't seen too many of his. I've seen Roma's Scandals. That's probably the most famous one that he did, right?
Yeah.
And
Laurel and Hardy are great. Sons of the Desert's one of my favorite movies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you see the new one, the Stan and Ollie film?
No, I haven't seen it yet. Have you?
Yes, I saw it. Well, it wasn't the day it came out nationally, but it was the day it came out up here in Eugene, Oregon, and which was last Friday. And yeah, there's times when you're watching it, and somebody said this before, some reviewer or something said, if you don't think about it, you think you're really watching Laurel and Hardy. I mean, they got it. They nailed it, They got it down. So, they must have studied the films and just knew how to do the little subtle nuances that make Laurel and Hardy special. And of course, makeup helps, but they kind of resemble the guys too anyway, so.
Yeah, I have to see that.
Well, my only quibble, and it was somebody else that said it too, is like, oh, why didn't they do their entire career? And it's like, because it would have been interesting. It's the latter part of their career, which is fine, but it'd be interesting if there's part of the film where it showed how they got teamed up. Even if it wasn't very remarkable, it would just be something interesting to put in the film. But
all right.
Maybe they can do a part 2 and have it as a prequel. I don't know.
Maybe.
But as far as biopics, it's one of the better ones. So it's not like a Donald O'Connor, Buster Keaton story, or.
Oh, okay, that's good. I'll definitely see it.
And like I said, they recreate some scenes from their films, and it's like, it's just like watching the same original film but in color. That's
wow. Okay.
It's amazing. So I was impressed. So.
I have to check it out.
Let's see. Are there any kind of more obscure films that you may, I mean, I'm probably one of the few. I think Kevin Scott Collier thinks this, who's a writer also, is like, I'm one of the few that actually likes Love Happy, even though most people don't. So are there any Marx Brothers films you like that most people don't, or any of the other famous comedy stars films that you might like that most people don't, or conversely that you just love and everybody else loves? It doesn't really matter.
Well, let's see. Some parts of Love Happy I like. I mean, especially Frank Tashlin scripted sections, with the end with the neon, the sign things that Harpo was on.
Yeah.
And I kind of like Room Service, which kind of gets short shrift. I guess it's stage bound, but I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think a Jerry Lewis film that people don't really appreciate is, I guess, his last film that he directed, which is called Cracking Up, or as it's known in Europe, Smorgasbord.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I said, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny how I saw that one. I didn't even know it was the same film, because I think originally, wasn't it supposed to be called Smorgasbord? And then it got released here as Cracking Up, and then
right.
I didn't see it in the theater. I don't even know if it came out in the theater. And
no, it was direct to video.
Okay.
In this country.
And I was in a hotel room. I was a teenager with my family, and my dad and everybody else was never a big Jerry Lewis fan. But I said, "Oh my God, a Jerry Lewis film I've never seen," and I didn't know it was supposed to be the same film. So it's like I was like, "What is this?" And it's not the best film, but there are some funny bits in it. I actually do enjoy it.
Yeah, I guess it's a kind of film that looks better on YouTube, where you can just watch the different sections. But I kind of like it, although 2 years ago, the Museum of Modern Art had a Jerry Lewis retrospective. They showed most of his films, and Cracking Up was one of them. And, I went to see it because I never saw it on a screen before. And, I just loved it, but most of the audience hated it. And when the film ended, it didn't just end and people got up and left. The film ended and it got dark in the theater, and you hear a voice going, "Jesus Christ, oi!" So I guess he wasn't a fan.
Well, in a certain way, that's to be expected. I mean, it's like, I've never seen the Jerry Lewis films he did later that were made in France. I don't even know if they came out here. I know of them, but of the ones he did, Hardly Working On, King of Comedy and all those, it's kind of like what I call the greasy, sleazy Jerry Lewis of the telethon doing these films, rather than the buzz cut nerd or whatever he was prior to that. So it is kind of hard to handle. Older Jerry doing some of the same old shtick that he did when he was younger, in a certain respect. But
oh yeah, I mean, in Cracking Up, there's a scene with him and Bill Richmond, who was a screenwriter.
Yeah.
I never remember this scene, but there's a scene where they're little kids crossing the street, and they get stuck in the middle of the street because Jerry Lewis keeps dropping his books. He starts doing that shtick where you drop a book and the other one falls. Right. Which was really disturbing because these are guys who are like 60, and they have their short pants and cute little schoolboy get-up, and Bill Richmond has gray hair. It's almost horrifying.
Now, why do you think that is? I mean, I probably know the obvious answer. It's just, but why aren't old people funny? I mean, you see it happen with Bob Hope, it's like there's a real cutoff. I always think the cutoff, if you want to be generous, is Road to Hong Kong, but really I think of Bo James as like the cutoff. It's like any film made after the 50s. It's like suddenly it's reading cue card time on the special, and
I have to agree with you.
is there a reason for that? I mean, it's like, I'm trying to think of any comedians when they got older, if they retained their humor, I guess Bob Newhart kind of does on TV when he appears and stuff like that. I still laugh, even though he's in his 90s almost, but...
an older comedian, I'd say Buster Keaton still kept the ball rolling.
Even in the Beach Party movie?
Even the Beach Party. Even as Moana Chicky Baby.
I thought it was funny, and I'm sure he knows now, I'm sure he remembers now, but like me being fascinated and learning new things, John Cleese was on an interview, it must be like 20, 30 years ago now, and he was talking about how he was a fan of Buster Keaton, and somebody told him he was in some of those Beach Party films, and he couldn't believe it. He was like, what? That's what he did at the end of his career? He didn't even know, and it's like, well, yeah.
I got shocked. The funny thing about Bob Hope, there was a book out about him last year by Richard Zoglin called Hope.
Yeah.
And they're talking about, the book goes on about Bob Hope, and this late career, and how come he was so bad on television doing his monologues. And they interviewed one of his writers, and he said, well, when we were writing for Bob Hope, we weren't writing as if Bob Hope was doing the Bob Hope lines. We were writing the jokes as if Dave Thomas was doing Bob Hope. So there you have it.
No. But do you think that's really it? The writing, about the only one I could. Well, even then, I don't know. It's like I'm trying to think. Three Stooges. They even got slower when they got older. I'm trying.
Yeah.
Anybody, hold on to it when they're older. But a lot of them they just stopped making movies. I guess W.C. Fields because he was old.
Yeah, he was old to be.
By the time talkies came in, so it's like, although his last couple performances were cut from the film, so I don't know if that means anything, but,
yeah, I don't know. You're right. I can't think of somebody who, I'm sure there must be somebody, but I can't think of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess comedy and humor, there's something to do with its kind of anti-establishment, and then as you get older, whether you like it or not, you kind of inevitably become establishment because there's nothing really to fight against anymore.
Well, Bob Hope was a prime example of that. He started out making these films, and his radio shows were like cutting edge political jokes, and and then he became part of the establishment. He was like playing golf with Nixon, giving Nixon advice on Vietnam or LBJ. So he really was the establishment.
Right.
So, and I guess Jerry Lewis too, with his I guess the dividing line for him might have been the Nutty Professor, although he made a lot of good films after that. But the dichotomy between Kelp and Buddy Love, when it first came out, people were equating Buddy Love as his commentary on Dean Martin, but in actuality, I think it was Lewis as a commentary on himself because he became Buddy Love.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is future Lewis. He did drink the serum or whatever it was.
Yeah, so...
Okay. Somebody else crossed my mind when we were talking here. Oh, Bob Hope again. I also have this theory about Bob Hope is he was always kind of jealous of Bing Crosby winning an Oscar, and so it seemed like he tried harder, and then the last kind of semi-serious movie he did was The Seven Little Foys, and then after that wasn't successful and he didn't get an Oscar nod, he just kind of gave up and just kind of said, nah, I'm done. Do you think that's kind of reasonable theory about
Yeah, bring on the cue cards. I mean, yeah, and when you get to his later film career,
yeah,
I mean, usually you side with the comic, but really, when you get to boy, did I get a wrong number and cancel my reservation, he plays a really hateful guy.
Yeah.
You know.
Very interesting.
So,
yeah, because
it's like. I was just going to say it's like Jerry Lewis in Boeing. He plays such a nasty, irritating friend of Tony Curtis that there's a scene where Jerry Lewis gets the shit beat out of him, and you're like siding with the guys who are punching him.
It's really sad when Tony Curtis is the funniest guy in the film.
Yeah. And, that's Thelma Ritter's last movie. It probably killed her.
But it is interesting what you said about Buster Keaton, because was his last film funny thing happened on the way to the Forum?
Yeah, believe that was his last film.
Okay. I mean, that's not the best film in the world, but it has some moments, and he seems funny in it, and things like that.
But amazingly, he's consistently doing Buster Keaton, even if it's How to Stuff a Wild Bikini. He's still doing Buster Keaton, and he's still got the timing. It's like incredible.
Yeah. I always wonder if some of those other ones would have been able to do that kind of stopped. If Laurel and Hardy got to do some of the films they were thinking of at the later end instead of doing the European tours that they did. I don't know, but
wasn't Stan Laurel? He made the Atoll K, and I think they made it after he had a stroke.
Well, I don't think he had a stroke, but yeah, he got really emaciated, and yeah. But they did the tours. I mean, we're talking to the Stan and Ollie movie. Yeah, that happened after Atoll K. And in the movie, they were talking about trying to get a script sold for a Robin Hood film, which, I don't know, there'd been, even then, so many Robin Hood adaptations, I don't know if it would have worked, but it was an interesting idea, I guess.
Yeah.
But, I guess that's another thing. These guys kind of run out of ideas, It's like, like Abbott and Costello, use them as an example, It's like what saved their career eventually ruined their career. It's like they met Frankenstein, which is a great movie, and then they said, hey, let's start meeting other people, and it's like, no, it's good once, maybe twice, but don't keep meeting people. And it's like, then they meet the Keystone Cops. It's like, and Snore, boring. Captain
Abbott
Kidd.
Costello meet Joseph McCarthy.
Yes, that's what I was getting down to, and it's like, I always wonder if they had kept going. It's like after Dance with Me, Henry. Which actually, I don't mind that film. I a lot of people diss that film, but it's not a bad little film. It's not their best, but
it's a quieter, gentler Abbott and Costello.
Yeah.
As opposed to their frenetic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I don't know what it is. I guess. Like Dylan used to say, don't trust anyone over 30. Don't trust any comedian over 60.
Yeah, I guess so. Because, you could say, oh, that just happened then because there was a generation gap. But I can see it even in more recent comedians that have been around a while, like, say, Eddie Murphy. He used to be the hottest thing out there. And then later he just made these ones that seemed like he was sleepwalking through. And it's like, is this the same guy?
Right.
And even Mike Myers, it's like he did like 3 Austin Powers movies. The third one's a little bit off, but it's still funny. And then he does The Love Guru, and it's like, what was that?
Cat in the Hat.
Yeah, and that type of stuff. And it's like, okay, it's like the proverbial jump the shark thing that they talk about. It's like.
Well, and also, Richard Pryor too. Another thing might be the problem, at least in the last 30 or 40 years, is that when comedians are really cooking and they're coming out with great films and they discover they make a lot of money, then somehow the comedians become for kids. They make movies for. They don't make movies for adults anymore.
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy makes Dr. Dolittle, say, or Richard Pryor does Superman 3 or something like that, or the
and
toy.
even went further and had Pryor's places on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
It's like.
And who else? Robin Williams the same way.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's because a lot of these comedians have kids, and they go, "Oh, I should make a film that doesn't have every four-letter word in the world, and nudity and everything else." I guess they feel guilty or something. I don't know. I think I'd just keep doing what I was doing and just say, "Hey, when you're old enough, you can watch what I do." But
yeah.
I'm no comedic actor, so maybe that's why. But I do know, like in the case of Pryor, he said so in his autobiography. It's like it was hard to resist doing things like Superman 3. And he said, I know these films are crap, but hey, they threw a lot of money at me. I'll do it. It's like...
Yeah, so, I guess it works for a while, but then, then the next thing you know, you're using your money like Steve Martin to buy... Impressionist paintings or something,
Right. And Steve Martin's another one, actually funnily enough, he can be funny now, it's like, even though he tours with the banjo and the bluegrass stuff, he'll do funny comedy shtick between, and he's toured with Martin Short, but like his movies went from being pretty zany and bizarre to just, again, family movies, Parenthood and Cheaper by the Dozen or whatever he did, those type of things, and it's like Father of the Bride, that's what I was thinking of, and it's like, why, Steve, why? He used to be funny. And then he went, to me, is sacrilegious one step further, is he becomes Bilko, and then he becomes Bluzo, and it's like, no, quit ruining these iconic comedy actors. What are you going to do next, Groucho? It's like, stop.
Yeah.
So.
That film version of Camp Run Amok or something like that.
And you go, why do they do this? And it's got to just be money, but it's like you think about after a while, it's like how much money do these guys need? I don't know, but and then sometimes some comedic actors befuddle me, like Peter Sellers. He had 50, 60 movies in his lifetime, and probably about 10 are funny. It's like, and yet he's revered as a comedic genius, which I agree with. But it's just weird that he made so many crummy films. I don't get that. But anyway,
Well, I think at one point he thought he was a motion picture screen idol, and his career started tanking along with Blake Edwards, and they said, hey, let's bring back Inspector Clouseau. So that's how they did all those later day Pink Panther movies.
Yeah.
They were both at a low ebb in their careers, and those things, gave them hits and money.
Right. It is amazing, though, that, because that kind of goes against what we're talking about. Sometimes, they were older when they did those, but they still hold up. I mean, maybe Shot in the Dark is still funnier than the latter three, but, I still like, Return, Revenge, and Strikes Again, so,
Yeah.
But,
I guess it also helps where you have the same director.
Yeah.
Doing the films, too.
But even directors, and I was going to say even Blake Edwards, but even directors kind of lose their touch after a while. Like Mel Brooks, I think, is still funny in his 90s, but, he stopped being funny in the movies, probably around Spaceballs. I know some people love Spaceballs, but it's like, I cringed when I saw that when it came out. I was like, And also I was kind of like, where's Harvey Korman? Where's Madeline Kahn? Where's all these regular people? But that was me at the time, but...
No, I think Mel Brooks, he's starting to believe his own publicity about it. Zany Mel Brooks, and I think it was on the commentary to Young Frankenstein when Mel Brooks was talking about the genesis of the film and how they were working on it during Blazing Saddles. And Mel Brooks, because I guess Gene Wilder was the creative force behind Young Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
And Mel Brooks eventually helped him with the script, and he said, I'd like to direct it. And Gene Wilder says, you can direct it, only one thing. He goes, what's that? Make sure you're not in the movie. And, I think his best movies are the films he is not in, like, Young Frankenstein and The Producers.
Yeah. Interesting, yeah.
I mean, in the silent movie, his character is Mel Fun.
Right.
So, come on.
And you could even say Blazing Saddles. He is in it, but not as much as, say, High Anxiety or something like that, where he's the star, and then suddenly you have to accept Mel as, like, this romantic screen idol, and it's like, okay,
Yeah. And I guess he was, like, in his mid-50s when he did that.
Right, and, Mel Brooks wasn't, he's a stocky, short guy.
Yeah.
He's not really the most glamorous screen idol even at that age. He's not like Cary Grant or somebody that would really be a matinee idol in a Hitchcock film, but okay, all right. I mean, I do like High Anxiety. There's an example of, films that some people hate, and I actually like that one, but it's still an odd choice to have him cast himself. He probably should have got a different star, but yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like that one too. I like his Frank Sinatra impersonation, singing the title tune.
Mm-hmm.
And Howard Morris's line at the end, where Mel Brooks is overcoming his high anxiety going up the steps like at the end of Vertigo, and Howard Morris is screaming, "Climb, you son of a bitch!"
And then Mel says, "I'm not afraid of heights. It's parents."
Right.
Anyway, well, this has been a very entertaining talk, and everything. I got to learn a little bit about you and your various projects. It's that time where you can plug anything. So how do people get a hold of your books or get a hold of you, or if you have a website?
I have no website, but I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
And the books are called Digging Down Deep, Subterranean Homesick Movie Reviews, and the second one's called Digging Down Deeper, Film Writings Found on the Scrapheap, and they're on Amazon.
Okay.
And that's it. And I'm available for parties. I can do balloon animals and dress in a clown suit.
And then your third book, the Digging Down Deepest, or wherever. Digging Down Deepest,
yes.
When is that expected to be done?
Probably in about 6 months it'll be out.
Okay. All right. We'll look for it. I'll take a look for that. I'll look for Orson Welles films. I'll look for all the things you talked about. And I appreciate you talking with me today.
Oh, thanks, Mark. It was nice talking to you.
Thank you for listening. Thank you again, Paul Brenner, for being my special guest. Episode number 29 will be coming soon. If you'd like to comment and or be a guest on this podcast, please drop me a line at funideas.mark@gmail.com. You can also become a Patreon of Fun Ideas Productions, and if everyone listening just contributed $1 a month, it would be a tremendous help. Also, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. This has been the Fun Ideas Podcast. This is Mark Arnold speaking. This episode is copyright 2019 Fun Ideas Productions. Thank you very much, and have a good night.